You're insane, Quinn said, his voice cold. We almost died in there. I am never going back. Oh, you'll go back, Serpent smirked, a sinister and haunting smile. Those she has noticed can't escape. If you don't go back to find her, she will come to find you. Just you wait and see. With that, he opened the door and left, leaving Quinn alone in the room with his terrifying warning and the audio file, its red light still blinking on the table like the eye of a demon. That night, Quinn couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the mournful whisper, the piercing shriek, and the thumping of the heart buried beneath the earth. Serpent's words hung over him like a curse, haunting his mind. And they were about to come true. The long night finally passed, but its darkness seemed to linger, thick in the early morning air. Quinn woke with a splitting headache and a dry, scratchy throat. When he sat up, he saw a dark red stain, dried on his white pillowcase. He touched his nose and felt the lingering dampness. A nosebleed. He'd never had a nosebleed in his life. A terrifying coincidence. Serpent's words from the night before echoed in his ear. If you don't go back to find her, she will come to find you. He tried to push the thought away, telling himself he was just overly stressed, that the air here was drier than in Crestfall City. But deep down, a cold unease began to spread. He got up and hurried to knock on Annie's door. He knocked several times with no answer. Worried, he pulled out his phone and called her. After a few long rings, she picked up, her voice hoarse and exhausted. I'm here. I'm okay. It's just. I had a nightmare. They arranged to meet at the small diner downstairs. Annie looked haggard, with dark circles under her eyes, her usual bubbly energy completely gone. She told him that all night, she had dreamed she was lost in an endless lime-scale forest, the water up to her neck, freezing cold. And from beneath the black, tar-like water, countless pale, skinny arms reached up, grabbing her legs, pulling her deeper and deeper. In the dream, she heard a woman singing a lullaby while weeping inconsolably, a haunting melody she couldn't forget. I think we should leave this place, Quinn, Annie said, her hand trembling as she held her glass of iced coffee. As soon as possible. I don't want to stay here another minute. This place isn't normal. Quinn wanted to as well. The rational part of his brain told him to pack his bags, get on the first bus back to the city, and forget about the Serpent's Creek shrine and its ghostly sounds. Bury it like a bad memory. But something, a scientist's morbid curiosity, a sound hunter's obsession, held him back. That audio file was a groundbreaking discovery, an unrecorded phenomenon. It could change everything he knew about sound, about the connection between emotion, memory, and physical vibrations. To abandon it would be a betrayal of himself, of the life's purpose he had chosen. I need a little more time, Quinn replied, his voice hesitant. I need to analyze what we recorded more carefully. It might just be some complex acoustic resonance phenomenon. Annie looked at him with a mixture of pity and reproach. Analyze? For what? To prove that ghosts are real? And then what? Are you going to announce it to the world? Who's going to believe you? They'll say you're crazy. Their argument was interrupted by the appearance of Serpent. He looked no better than they did. His face was gaunt, his stubble unkempt, his eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept in a week. But when he saw Quinn, his eyes lit up with a wild, sick hope. So? Have you changed your mind? Serpent plopped down into a plastic chair, uninvited, his voice raspy. I said no, Quinn said through gritted teeth, not hiding his disdain. Then you'd better look at this. Serpent held out his old brick phone. It was a video clip he had asked Annie for the night before for a souvenir, the one where she panned across the shrine's interior. "Look closely in the dark corner on the left, where the puddle is," Serpent said, his finger tapping the scratched screen. "Slow it down." Quinn and Annie held their breath and watched. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just the familiar scene. But when Serpent paused on a specific frame and zoomed in, their hearts seemed to stop. In the stagnant puddle, the reflection wasn't of the roof, nor was it the ghostly woman's face Annie had seen. It was a blurry, human-shaped shadow. And right next to that shadow, on the ground beside the puddle, something glinted, reflecting the faint light. A small metal object, shaped like an antique hairpin. "See?" Serpent said triumphantly, his voice agitated. "There. That must be my grandfather's gold. My father said he hid the gold in the landlady's jewelry box. That hairpin has to be part of the treasure. It's right there. We just have to go back and get it. This is just a blurry reflection. It could be anything, a piece of a bottle, a scrap of tin," Quinn argued, though a sense of unease was rising in his own chest. The image was too clear. "No. I know that's it," Serpent insisted, his eyes wild. "My father described it exactly. The landlady had a very precious solid gold hairpin in the shape of a phoenix. If you just help me, ask her permission, make her leave us alone, we'll be rich. I'll split it with you, 50-50. No, 70-30. You take 70. Annie shot to her feet, unable to stand it any longer. "You're insane. Do you have any idea what we just went through? We are not going back there. Quinn, let's go." She pulled hard on Quinn's arm, but he didn't move. His eyes were still glued to the phone screen. A hairpin. Why would an object like that be in a place of worship, even a ruined one? Was it connected to the vengeful spirit in Serpent's story? A drowned woman, a hairpin. The details swirled in his mind. Seeing Quinn's hesitation, Serpent delivered another psychological blow. "If you two won't help, I'll go alone. The loan sharks have me backed into a corner anyway. High risk, high reward. But I'm telling you, if you piss her off without knowing how to talk to her, how to appease her like you can, the consequences will be unpredictable. She might just come looking for you two again." With that, he stood up and walked away, leaving his threat hanging in the humid morning air. In the following days, the curse seeped deeper into their lives, like a slow-acting poison. Quinn no longer had nosebleeds, but he began to hear strange sounds even without his headphones, in broad daylight. The sound of water running in the bathroom, even though he had checked and tightened the faucet. The sound of a woman sobbing mournfully in the hallway in the middle of the night. He would rush to open the door to find the hallway empty and silent. He tried to capture these sounds with his professional recorder, but the result was only a dead silence. As if the sounds existed only in his head, meant only for him to hear. Annie was worse off. Her fear manifested physically. She didn't dare to be alone, even during the day. She had to keep all the lights on in her room, even when she slept. She lost weight rapidly, her cheeks grew hollow, her vibrant energy vanished. And the most terrifying thing, strange bruises began to appear on her arms and legs, shaped like the fingerprints of someone who had gripped her tightly. She insisted she hadn't bumped into anything. They just appeared every morning when she woke up. Things came to a head on the third day after their visit to the shrine. Quinn was in his room, using specialized software to filter and analyze the audio file, when Annie burst in without knocking. Her face was ashen, and she was holding her laptop, trembling violently. You have to see this," she stammered, her voice frantic. It changed by itself. On the screen was the video project she had been editing about their trip. But some force had tampered with it. The peaceful, serene shots of the forest landscape were now interspersed with grainy, black and white clips, each only a few seconds long. In those glitching clips, one could faintly see a long-haired woman sitting by a creek, combing her dark hair. Then, an image of a little boy playing in the water, splashing happily. And most horrifyingly, a scene of the woman being forced underwater by a large, fierce-looking man, her legs thrashing wildly. Meanwhile, the little boy stood on the bank, crying desperately. Silent but haunting images, like a cursed memory reel. "I didn't film any of this," Annie cried. "They just appeared in my source files. It's like my camera recorded the memories of that place." Quinn was frozen. A chill ran through him. This was no longer a matter of sound or visual illusions. The curse was invading their lives through every medium, dreams, their bodies, even their electronic devices. It was backing them into a corner, leaving them no escape. "We have to find someone to help," Quinn decided firmly. His scientific rationality had completely crumbled in the face of these supernatural events. Mr. Hale mentioned an old man living on the edge of the forest. "They call him Old Man Hemlock, right? He said the old man knows a lot of the old stories around here." They quickly asked for directions and found Old Man Hemlock's house. It was a simple, small leaf-thatched hut, separate from the village, nestled among lush fruit orchards. An old man came out to meet them. He was small and stooped, his skin wrinkled, but his eyes were still bright and shone with a strange intelligence. As his name suggested, he was almost completely deaf. Annie had to shout into his ear, but he still shook his head, unable to hear clearly. So Quinn took out a notebook and pen, writing down his questions, describing everything that had happened their visit to the shrine, what they saw and heard, and the strange phenomena that were now haunting them. After slowly reading Quinn's words through a pair of thick reading glasses, the old man showed no surprise or fear. He simply nodded silently, then went inside and brought out an earthenware teapot and 2 small cups. He motioned for them to sit on the wooden porch, then slowly poured the tea. He began to speak, his voice hoarse and difficult to hear, like an old machine that hadn't been used in a long time. "The Shrine of the Serpent's Creek Lady, people call it that, but they're wrong. It's not a shrine for worship. It's a place of imprisonment." Old Man Hemlock began to tell a story completely different from Serpent's greedy, twisted version. It happened over a century ago, during the French colonial period. The victims were indeed a woman named Layla and her young son. But Layla was not a mistress. She was the daughter of a poor local farmer, known for her beauty and gentle nature. Her beauty caught the eye of the French landowner in the area. He used his power to assault her. When she became pregnant, he feared for his reputation and trouble with his French wife, so he ordered his Chinese foreman to take care of it. The cruel foreman drowned both Layla and her child in that very creek to cover up the crime. Her wrongful death was so profound that Layla's spirit could not pass on, transforming into a vengeful ghost, haunting the water and the forest. She brought plagues and disasters to the village, to the people who had stood by silently and witnessed the landowner's crime. People who went into the forest disappeared, and livestock died for no reason. The villagers back then were terrified. They pooled their money and invited a high monk from the Seven Mountains region to perform a ritual. Old Man Hemlock continued, his gaze distant. After examining the situation, the monk said that Layla's vengeful energy had fused with the water and the land itself, and it was too strong to be completely dispelled. The only way was to imprison her spirit. They built that shrine and used an object that was dear to Layla in life as an anchor, the silver phoenix hairpin her mother had left her. They used it to bind her soul to the shrine, to keep her from roaming and causing harm. And a curse was placed: anyone who takes the binding object, or disturbs the rest of the mother and child, will have the vengeful energy unleashed upon them. Quinn and Annie felt a chill run down their spines. So Serpent had been half right. There was a hairpin, but it wasn't treasure, it was the key to a prison holding a hate-filled spirit. And he wanted to break open that prison to find gold. So, what do we do now? Quinn quickly wrote on the paper. We've disturbed her. Old Man Hemlock looked at Quinn for a long time, a deep, penetrating gaze. You can hear her voice, can't you? Quinn was stunned, then slowly nodded. Then you are the only one who can talk to her. Her vengeful spirit doesn't just want to kill. She wants to find her child. When she was drowned, her little boy's body was swept away by the current and never found. The child's spirit is still wandering somewhere in this forest. Old Man Hemlock pointed toward the vast expanse of trees. She is trapped in the shrine and cannot look for him. That pain is even greater than her hatred. If you can find the child's spirit and bring it back to its mother, perhaps the vengeful energy will dissipate. It seemed an impossible task. How could they find the soul of a child who had died 100 years ago in such a vast, gloomy forest? When they returned to the motel, their hearts heavy with confusion and fear, they found Serpent slumped on the steps, looking pathetic. His face was bruised, his clothes disheveled, and one of his arms was crudely bandaged. Serpent? What happened to you? Annie blurted out. Serpent looked up, his eyes filled with panic and madness. She came for me. Last night, I was sleeping, and suddenly the cups on the altar in my house flew around and shattered. Then someone pushed me, and I tumbled down the stairs. She won't leave me alone. We have to go back. We have to get the hairpin. Maybe that's what's holding her, what's causing her pain. If we take it out, she'll be freed. Greed and fear had driven the man completely insane. He was twisting everything to his advantage, convincing himself that taking the treasure was an act of liberation for the spirit. Quinn knew he couldn't stop a madman like Serpent. And he knew he couldn't run away anymore. He, Annie, and Serpent were all, one way or another, bound to the curse of the Serpent's Creek Shrine. Their lives now depended on whether they could appease that vengeful spirit. The only way to survive wasn't to run, but to face it. All right, Quinn said, his voice so firm it surprised even himself. We'll go back. But not to get gold. We're going back to end this. He looked at Annie, his eyes an apology for dragging her into this. She said nothing, just looked at him and gave a slight nod. In her eyes, there was no longer doubt or blame, only an acceptance of their fate. They had stepped into this mess together, and now they had to find a way out together, or be pulled under together. That night, a sudden thunderstorm swept over the region. Thunder rolled, tearing the black sky with brilliant flashes of light. The wind howled through the Melaleuca trees, creating a mournful sound, like the weeping of 10,000 vengeful souls. It was as if the heavens themselves were heralding the life-or-death confrontation that was to come. 3 people, with 3 different motives: Serpent, with his blind greed and the desperation of a cornered man; Annie, with her fear and her determination to record the truth; and Quinn, with his ability to hear echoes from the other side, burdened with the task of finding a lost child's soul. They were preparing to return to the spirit's prison, where the beating of the hateful heart buried beneath the earth was growing louder, waiting for them. The sky after last night's thunderstorm was still heavy with gray clouds. The Blackwood Forest, freshly washed, was greener and damper, but the atmosphere was even more gloomy and oppressive. Serpent's skiff once again cut through the water, carrying 3 people with entirely different states of mind back to the creek that led to the malevolent shrine. This time, no one spoke. The silence was as tense as a guitar string about to snap. Serpent, though one arm was still bandaged and aching, had a reckless determination in his eyes, like a gambler playing his final hand. He had brought a small crowbar and a cloth bag, making no effort to hide his intention to pry and dig for gold. Annie clutched her camera to her chest like a shield. Her face was pale, but her eyes were strangely resolute. Fear had given way to acceptance. She had decided to record everything, no matter what happened, so that the story of Layla and her son's unjust fate would be brought to light. As for Quinn, he wore his headphones, his eyes half closed. He was no longer listening to the sounds of nature. He was trying to tune in, to catch the frequency of the vengeful spirit, trying to sense its presence before it could strike. He was like a minesweeper, cautiously stepping into an invisible minefield. As the boat rounded the familiar bend, the mound with the solitary shrine came into view again. This time, the scene was even stranger. A thin layer of white mist hovered over the bare ground around the shrine, drifting like lost souls, even though the sun was already quite high. And from within the shrine, a faint, flickering, bluish light, like phosphorescence, emanated from the rotting doorway. She's in there," Serpent whispered, his voice trembling but laced with sick excitement. He thought it was the gleam of gold and jewels. Quinn signaled for him to cut the engine. He took off his headphones. The air was terrifyingly still. But in his mind, the whisper had already begun, clearer than ever. "Where is my son?" "She's asking about her child," Quinn said quietly to the other 2. "We have to let her know we're here to help, not to harm." They went ashore. Quinn led the way, followed by Annie, with Serpent at the rear. The moment their feet touched the mound, the blue light in the shrine flared once and then vanished. Darkness and silence returned. "Don't be afraid," Quinn said, reassuring himself as much as the others. "Just keep going." They stepped inside the shrine. This time, there was no cold wind, no piercing shriek. Only a deathly silence and a stench of mold, stronger than before. On the altar, the old wooden tablet was vibrating slightly, though there was no wind. Quinn placed his recorder on the altar and hit record. He took a deep breath. "Ma'am," he began, his voice echoing in the small space. "We haven't come here to desecrate this place. We know about the injustice done to you and your son. We truly want to help you find him." The response was silence. But then, on the dusty surface of the altar, words began to appear, as if an invisible finger was writing in the grime. "Liar." Annie gasped, covering her mouth to keep from screaming. Serpent took a step back, clutching his crowbar defensively. "We are not lying," Quinn insisted, his voice firm. "We know you were wronged by the landowner and his foreman. We know how great your suffering is. But for you to find peace, you must let go of your hatred. Tell us, where can we find your son?" New words appeared, the letters now sloppy, trembling, and full of rage. "What is mine? Give it back." The spirit's invisible gaze seemed to fixate on Serpent. The man jumped, sweat pouring from his forehead. What? He stammered. I didn't take anything of yours. Give it back. This time, the scream didn't appear as text. It erupted from everywhere, from the walls, the roof, from beneath the ground. A polyphonic scream, full of power and fury, that shook the entire shrine. Plaster began to rain from the walls. At the same time, Serpent let out a heart-wrenching scream of pain. He collapsed, clutching his bandaged arm. Aya! My arm! It's breaking my arm. Quinn and Annie watched in horror as an invisible force bent Serpent's arm backward at an unnatural angle. The sickening crack of bone was audible. But no one was there. He was being tortured by the spirit itself. What did you take? Tell me, now. Quinn yelled at Serpent, trying to snap him out of it. Nothing. I didn't. I swear. Serpent wailed in agony, his face turning purple. Stop lying. Annie screamed, remembering the bruises on her own arms. She knows everything. You snuck back here, didn't you? After our first night here. Under the relentless questioning and excruciating pain, Serpent finally broke and confessed. That night, after leaving Quinn's room, greed had triumphed over fear. He had rode back to the shrine alone in the middle of the night. But he was too terrified to go all the way inside. He stood outside and used a long pole to fish out something that was lying just inside the doorway in the darkness. It was a small, rotten wooden box. He excitedly opened it, but there was no gold or silver inside, only a carefully tied lock of a child's hair and a single, tiny baby tooth. Thinking it was worthless trash, he had angrily thrown the box into the creek. Quinn and Annie were stunned. They understood everything. It wasn't trash. It was her son's mementos. The only things the unfortunate mother had left of her poor child. And Serpent, in his blind greed, had thrown them away. He had severed the final connection between a mother and her child. Oh my God! What have you done? Quinn cried out in despair. He had unintentionally committed an unforgivable sin. I will end you. The spirit's scream seemed to shake the heavens. The entire shrine convulsed violently. An invisible force lifted Serpent into the air, slamming him against the walls repeatedly like a rag doll. Blood sprayed from his mouth onto the moldy walls. Stop! Quinn yelled, and without thinking, he stood in front of the barely conscious Serpent. It's not all his fault. We're the ones who came here, who disturbed this place. If you want to punish someone, punish me. Annie, summoning all her courage, raised her camera and aimed its flash directly at the altar, even though nothing was there. Look! She sobbed. We will tell the whole world your story. Your name will be cleared. No one will forget you. Please, calm your anger. The invisible force seemed to lessen slightly in the face of their courage. Serpent fell to the ground with a thud, unconscious and bleeding. But the air remained tense. Layla's vengeful energy was too strong. The loss of her son's last mementos had pushed her rage to its peak. She no longer trusted anyone. Suddenly, Quinn felt a change in the sound. The angry whisper in his head was gone. It had turned into a melody. A lullaby. Mournful, poignant, familiar.
Quinn carries the mist across the sky. The water is the eye, to face a bitter blood.
Quinn recognized it instantly. This was the Banshee's wail from the professor's original audio file. But now, he wasn't just hearing it. He was seeing it. In his mind's eye, like a memory clip, an image of Layla in a simple brown blouse appeared, sitting by the creek, singing to her baby boy who was sleeping soundly in her arms. A peaceful image, yet tinged with an infinite sadness. "Your son, he wouldn't want to see you like this," Quinn said, his voice trembling, tears welling up in his eyes. He was talking to the spirit, but also to himself, about his own lost sister, Maya. He loves you. He wants you to be at peace. He slowly closed his eyes, casting aside all fear, focusing his entire being on the lullaby echoing in his head. He wasn't a singer, but he had perfect pitch, an almost flawless ability to replicate sound. He began to hum along softly, recreating the mournful, fragmented melody with his own voice. He sang not just with his vocal cords, but with his whole heart, with the empathy of someone who had also tasted the pain of losing a loved one. The shrine fell silent. The wind stopped. The shaking ceased. Annie watched, holding her breath. A strange phenomenon was happening before her eyes. From the altar, a wisp of blue smoke slowly gathered, gradually taking the form of a woman in a traditional blouse, her long hair flowing down. Her face was pale and tear-streaked, but the fierce, angry expression was gone, replaced by an infinite sorrow. The vengeful spirit of Layla had materialized. She stared at Quinn, as if she couldn't believe her ears. The song of this stranger, this intruder, could so perfectly replicate the lullaby she had sung to her son every night. Quinn continued to sing, pouring all his emotion into every word. He sang of injustice, of separation, but also of a mother's sacred love, of the hope for a reunion in another world. When he finished the song, the spirit of Layla raised her translucent arm and pointed toward the door, toward the creek. "Find him." Her voice was a faint whisper, no longer a scream, but a plea. Quinn understood. Music had touched the most human part of her soul. She no longer wanted revenge. Her longing to find her son had overcome her hatred. Just then, from the doorway, a small, translucent figure slowly entered. It was the spirit of a young boy, about 5 or 6 years old, his clothes tattered. The child looked at his mother, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. He had been wandering here for so long, he had even forgotten who his mother was. "My child," the spirit of Layla wept, reaching her translucent arms toward the boy, but not daring to step forward. The boy shrank back, frightened by his mother's ghostly form, full of vengeful energy. Quinn knew what he had to do. He began to sing again. This time, it wasn't the sad lullaby. He sang a cheerful nursery rhyme he used to make up for his deaf sister. A song about storks, about the river, about the peaceful summer afternoons of the countryside. Quinn's clear, bright melody seemed to touch a deep memory within the child's soul. He stopped, tilting his head to listen. The fear in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by a flicker of familiarity, a spark of joy. The spirit of Layla also began to change. The blue smoke of hatred dissipated. Her form became clearer, her face no longer deathly pale but rosy, just like the woman in Quinn's vision. She was no longer a vengeful ghost, but had returned to the form of a gentle mother. She smiled, a kind, tear-filled smile, and opened her arms. The little boy finally recognized his mother. He let out a wordless cry of joy and ran to her, throwing his arms around her. Mother and child, after more than a century of painful, hateful separation, were finally reunited. They held each other, their bodies gradually becoming transparent, merging into a warm, pale yellow sphere of light. The sphere rose, passed through the rotten roof of the shrine, and ascended into the sky, toward the gray clouds that were now parting, making way for the brilliant afternoon sun. When the sphere of light vanished, the shrine suddenly became bright and strangely warm. The smell of mold and death disappeared, replaced by the faint, sweet scent of lime-scale blossoms drifting in from the forest. The horrifying scratch marks on the walls faded and then disappeared as if they had never existed. The wooden tablet on the altar crumbled into dust and vanished into the air. The curse was broken. Quinn and Annie stood in silence, witnessing a miracle that no science could ever explain. A moment later, Serpent moaned and regained consciousness. His arm was back to normal, no longer twisted, just sore. He looked around, bewildered, with no understanding of what had just happened. They left the shrine, no one speaking a word. The mound of earth no longer looked desolate and dead. A few green shoots were already beginning to sprout from the barren ground. Their journey back was completely different. The sun shone brightly, and birds sang everywhere. The Blackwood Melaleuca Forest had returned to its natural, vibrant peace, as if a century-old burden had finally been lifted. A few weeks later, in a small recording studio in Crestfall City, Annie had uploaded the entire story to her vlog channel. Her video, titled The Truth About the Serpent's Creek Curse, along with the ghostly memory clips and the audio file of the spirit's voice provided by Quinn, created a massive stir on social media. The story of Layla and her son's tragic fate and the truth about the prison shrine spread far and wide. The local government of Ashford Province eventually stepped in, verifying the history with elderly locals and old documents, and decided to build a small pagoda on that very spot to commemorate and bring peace to the wronged souls. The name Shrine of the Serpent's Creek Lady was gradually replaced by a gentler one, the Mother and Child Pagoda. Serpent, after his miraculous survival, was a changed man. He gave up gambling and drinking completely and got a job as an eco-tour guide for the Forest Management Board. He used his deep knowledge of the forest to help people appreciate and protect nature. He never mentioned the treasure again, and every time he took tourists past that area, he would clasp his hands and bow his head toward the newly built pagoda. As for Quinn, he sat in his studio, listening to the final audio file from the shrine. It was the recording of him singing. Mixed in with his own trembling voice, if one listened closely with professional headphones, one could clearly hear a woman's soft lullaby and the clear, giggling laughter of a child. It was a final gift from Layla and her son, an inexplicable sound, a thank you from the other side. He didn't release this special recording. He kept it for himself, like a precious memento. The trip hadn't helped him talk to his deceased sister, but it had helped heal a part of his wounded heart. He understood that sound wasn't just for preserving memories of the past, it also had the power to heal pain, to connect souls, even if they were in different worlds. He smiled, moving the mouse cursor to his unfinished Primal Sounds project folder. He didn't delete it. He just renamed it. He would start a new project, one about the healing power of sound, about the frequencies of love and forgiveness. He knew that somewhere far away, in her own silent world, Maya was smiling at him too. The story of the Serpent's Creek Shrine would eventually become a local legend in the Ashford province. But for the three of them, it was an unforgettable experience, a costly lesson about greed, hatred, and ultimately, about how empathy and love can transcend space, time, and even death. The story ends here. Thank you for your interest and for listening to our channel's stories. Please support the channel by like the video if you enjoyed it. Comment with your thoughts on the story and its ending. Share this video with your friends and family. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next thrilling horror story. Thank you all for your support.